And you may start.
Good evening and welcome to this forum featuring the candidates running for the 108th Michigan House District that are on the ballot for the November 3rd election. My name is Shannon Taylor and I will serve as moderator. Tonight's forum is sponsored by the Delta County League of Women Voters, the American Association of University Women, AAUW. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization established to encourage citizen participation in government. It never supports or opposes any political party or candidate. We offer you this opportunity to become acquainted with the candidates and their views in order to promote an informed vote. The format for this evening will be as follows. Each candidate will have 1 minute for an opening statement, 1 minute for each question, and 1 minute for a closing statement. The candidates will be answering written questions submitted by the community. We will use as many questions as available. Time allows around 50 minutes. Each candidate will have the opportunity to respond to each of the questions asked. As this is a forum, not a debate, candidates are asked to respond only to the questions asked by the moderator. Please be respectful of other candidates. You are, however, free to address any appropriate issue during your opening and closing remarks. A timer will be used, and when time is up, a beep will sound and the timer will hold up a red signal. When the time expires, the speaker must end their response. I will then move the next question on to the next candidate. The moderator and host are present to ensure that the forum rules are followed. This forum will be recorded and made available for viewing on our local website at www.lwvdeltacounty.org. We now welcome the candidates for the Michigan House, Republican candidate Bo Lefebvre and Democratic candidate Renee Richer. We will begin with opening statements starting with candidate Lefebvre. Candidate Lefebvre, you have the floor for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, League of Women Voters and AAUW, for the opportunity to answer important questions. I can't imagine it was easy setting up a forum like this. I certainly enjoyed my time in Escanaba City Hall doing this last couple times. My name is Bo Lefebvre, and it's an honor to be your state representative for Dickinson, Delta, and Menominee counties. The reason I got into this race in 2016 was because I was sick of watching friends and family members flee across the Wisconsin border or into Ohio or Indiana because they couldn't find a job in the Upper Peninsula that they thought was valuable for them, and because of the extremely high cost of car insurance reform. Over my last 4 years in office, I've worked tirelessly to lower the cost of auto insurance and increase skilled training opportunities to get good, high-paying jobs here in the Upper Peninsula. I'm proud to say I've been successful in both of those endeavors, but my job isn't done yet. We still have affordable housing problem, and I have a bill to fix that, and I really appreciate the opportunity to discuss the issues.
Thank you, candidate Lefebvre. Candidate Richer, you have the floor for 1 minute.
Thank you, and thank you to the League of Women Voters and the AAUW. We appreciate having this forum. My name is Renee Richer, and I'm running to represent Delta, Dickinson, and Menominee counties. As a teacher, small business owner, and human health scientist, I come with 30 years of experience to get us back to work and back to school safely. I plan on working closely with our local public health department to increase their capacity as Delta County struggles with the highest rate of COVID increase in the state. My focus will be on rebuilding the economy by enhancing access to healthcare and education, improving our natural resources which fuel our economy, and I will also focus on the recovery of small businesses and small farms. The role of a state legislator is not only to craft legislation, but also to advocate for the community and enhance opportunities in the district. I look forward to working for you, the voters, and I ask for your vote.
Thank you, candidate Richard. That concludes opening statements. We will now proceed with the question segment. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to each question. We will begin with candidate Richer. Candidate Richer, what actions taken by the governor to address the COVID-19 crisis do you agree with? And or what specific actions do you think should have been done instead?
Thank you for that question. I think this is something that we need to consider strongly. The crisis, which is really hampering our economy right now, is due to the underlying health crisis. When we look at states that have succeeded during COVID, it's been states which have successfully handled the health issues. So I agree that we should have universal masking as much as possible. I agree in social distancing. I think we need to keep track of the number of people in large settings. I think that's all appropriate. I think what's important now is as we go forward, and we no longer have the executive orders, that management is going to come to our local public health departments. And so it's really the local public health departments which are going to be important in establishing what types of public health measures will be responsible.
Thank you, Candidate Richer. Candidate Lefebvre?
It's a really important question. I think the question was, what did I agree with the executive orders that the governor did? And the answer is none of them, because every single one of them was unconstitutional, according to the Michigan Supreme Court. They ruled 7-0 that all of her executive orders were unconstitutional under the 1976 law and 4-3 under the 1945 law. What the governor should have done was worked with the Democrats and Republicans in the Michigan House of Representatives and Senate to do sensible policies. But instead, she completely shut out every single voice of UP lawmakers and residents. It's unacceptable. She shoved thousands of COVID positive patients my age into nursing homes next to our most vulnerable population. And 2,000 people, if not more, are dead because of it. She shut down small businesses, but left open the big box stores. It was an absolute disaster, not based on sound science, but based on the whims of one person, and it was unacceptable.
Thank you, Candidate Lefebvre. We'll move on to our second question, and that will begin with Candidate Lefebvre. What do you think should be done about Enbridge's Line 5 to ensure safe, reliable, and affordable energy in the UP?
Pipeline 5 is the pipeline that goes across the entire Upper Peninsula through the Straits of Mackinac that supplies 65% of the home heating for the people of the Upper Peninsula. What we need to do is make sure that that pipeline is transporting it safely. So we sponsored legislation last term that would build a $500 million tunnel with union labor through the Straits of Mackinac to better protect our wonderful natural resources. The chances of that tunnel leaking oil into the Great Lakes is essentially zero. Any alternative to that tunnel includes 2,000 semi-trucks a day going across the Mackinac Bridge, or hundreds of rail cars across the UP, and double, triple, or quadrupling the cost of propane for UP residents. And that is something we simply cannot afford.
Thank you, Candidate Lefebvre. Candidate Richer?
Thank you. Delta County, having the largest amount of freshwater coastline in the lower 48, would be particularly susceptible to any type of oil spill in this area. And because of that, I'm supporting the Line 5 tunnel. I think the sooner we get that out of the water and protect our waters is very important. I think one thing that we need to keep in mind is whether Enbridge will consider to be a transparent partner and an open partner with the state of Michigan. And that's something that I'll work towards and something that I will support with that cooperation from Enbridge.
Thank you. Our third question now will begin again with Candidate Richer. Candidate Richer, what do you think needs to be done to protect watersheds to avoid disasters like those that happened in Kalamazoo River and Midland? Is the state doing enough, or should they be doing more?
In this case, you're referencing the dam safety.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So I think that's important to keep in mind that we have a number of very susceptible dams in the 108th district. Recent reports have come out of Eagle looking that there was simply an attitude of non-compliance or not properly following up with regulations that were already in place. And so I think those failures have really brought to light the risk that these dams face or pose to the community. So I think one thing that we need to address is having proper inspections and consistent monitoring of the dams. And again, we have a few low-graded dams in our 108 district that we should be aware of and be monitoring.
Thank you. Candidate LaFave?
Yeah, I think that this question is two parts. Number one, the reason the dam failed is because the federal government was responsible for looking at the dam safety. They determined the dam was in complete, blatant non-compliance, turned the regulation over to the Governor Whitmer administration, and after 2 years did absolutely nothing to ensure the safety of the dam. They knew of all the violations and did absolutely nothing. So I'm sponsoring an investigation into the disaster that the DEQ caused and the failure of the Whitmer administration to properly look into dam safety and protect the residents of the Upper Peninsula for future failures. In addition to that, watershed safety, Pipeline 5 has key areas where it goes across streams and rivers and lakes that feed directly into the Great Lakes other than the Straits of Mackinac. And I've been working with Enbridge to shore those up and make sure that if for some reason a spill were to occur, that we would be able to contain it.
Thank you, Candidate LaFave. Moving on to question number 4. Candidate LaFave, what will you do as a state legislature to ensure our local health departments have adequate resources for a fair and effective rollout of the COVID vaccine when it becomes available?
Well, number one is we have to open businesses safely and reasonably. Nobody wants to talk about the fact that when the governor shut down businesses in the Upper Peninsula unilaterally and unconstitutionally, she shut off the flow of tax revenue into the state that is used to fund our K-12 system, our roads, and our local health departments. The first thing we need to do is get the tax revenue flowing back in to the government so we don't have to, because we can't just borrow the money. You know, this isn't Congress. We can't just pretend that we're gonna tax our grandchildren later and borrow the money today. That is not how our Constitution of Michigan is set up. We are barred by the Constitution from going into debt. So we need to open businesses safely and effectively to fund our local health departments. And I think our local health departments do a heck of a lot better of a job than one doctor and one governor in Lansing who hasn't been in Delta County for over a year.
Thank you, Candidate LaFave. Candidate Richer?
Yeah, I think this is a really important issue. I've been in contact with directors of our local public health departments, speaking to them, finding out what types of resources that they need. And right now they feel that they're under a tremendous amount of stress and they simply don't have the staffing power to deal with the rapid increase of COVID in the area right now. So when it comes to a vaccine, obviously we're going to have to increase staffing. Now, how we do that is still to be determined. And I think one thing that we can do is we can have the movement of staff amongst other local health departments. So here in the Upper Peninsula, there may be a health department which is able to support a vaccination program in one county, and then we may have a vaccination program in the adjacent county following. So again, in my conversations with our local public health departments, they're really looking for staffing.
Shannon, I
Shannon,
think
you're muted.
Thanks, Renee.
Thank you. Renee, we'll move on with our next question for you. Are our current state laws regarding paid medical leave for Michigan workers adequate? Why or why not?
Well, when it comes to COVID, this is something that as a candidate, I've been encountering in the community a lot. So there are family members with children, with those who are susceptible, and they simply don't have access to paid medical leave. And it could be in response to COVID, if that's what the question is concerning, or if you're talking, for example, about paid family medical leave. But I think that's a weakness that we have. I think that's something that's going to be really important as we promote policies which are family friendly and would actually improve the lives and the livelihoods of those in the district.
Thank you, Candidate Richer. Candidate Lefebvre?
No, in response to the COVID crisis, 20 weeks of unemployment is not enough for some people that have serious immunocompensations or have family members that do. That's why on Tuesday, I will be going to the Michigan House of Representatives and voting on a plan to extend unemployment benefits for people exactly that we're describing here, who just want to go back to work but can't because of the ongoing coronavirus pandemic.
Thank you. Candidate Lefebvre, what specific legislative positions will you support to resolve the dark store issues?
I've been working with the City of Escanaba Council and City Manager and UP local units of government for 4 years on this issue. This time the bill is my bill to fix it. I've been working with Democrat Representative Sarah Cambenzi, Republican Senator Ed McBroom, Republican Greg Markkinen from Hancock. We are working together on a team to fix this. Number one, we need to get rid of the goofy comparables. What they do is they take a functioning, very good Menards in Escanaba and compare that to a heavily deed-restricted Menards in a suburb of a community where everybody has left and it's a defunct building that's 20 years old. So the deed restrictions are absolutely a part of it, and adding 3 layers to the tax tribunal, which are the sales approach, the income approach, and the cost approach. Right now, they're only using one of those 3, but if you get your home assessed, you can bet they'll use all 3 of them. Not fair. We'll get it fixed soon.
Thank you. Candidate Richer?
I think this is such a crucial issue in our community where we have a relatively small property tax base. We've seen in Dickinson County, it's been really devastating, as well as in Delta County. And this has in fact actually been a high priority of mine in having spoken to leaders in these communities who are struggling with the loss of tax dollars due to that. This is something that when I go to Lansing, I'll be sure to put on the forefront. I know that this is something which hasn't been easily tackled, and it's been sitting around on desktops for quite a long time. But this is a serious priority, and I look forward to working with those across the aisle to make it go through.
Thank you. Candidate Richer, in light of announcement of a spaceport coming to the Marquette area and other high-tech developments in the UP, how can the communities in the 108th benefit from these initiatives?
Well, the opportunities from that potential spaceport come in a variety of different ways. That can be with construction, in the trades, and all that's going to go into the actual production of that potential spaceport, but also in the management. And I think what's really interesting here is because these are really high-tech jobs, that we have the opportunity to bring home the very high-skilled labor and positions of in academia, physics, etc. Bring those who have been forced to leave the community, bring them back to the community and be able to offer really high quality jobs in this area.
Thank you. Candidate Lefebvre?
I want to start off by saying I support the launch facility in Marquette County. I think it's an incredible opportunity for the people of the Upper Peninsula to have a facility that is a big draw to our community, because when people move to the Upper Peninsula, there's nowhere else they want to move back to. There's nothing better than Michigan's Upper Peninsula. So I support the facility. I also sponsored House Bill 4106 in 2017 that got signed into law that allows high school students to get internships at places just like this, so they know they can get a good paying job in the Upper Peninsula. And finally, I'm supporting rural broadband expansion across the UP to help people be able to get these jobs. And maybe they'll work as a temporary employee in the construction portion of this, but long-term they want to live in a rural area and be able to get connected to their job in Chicago or something. We need that broadband, especially during this coronavirus pandemic. I support rural broadband expansion.
Thank you. Candidate Lefebvre, how would you address the racial, health, and economic inequities in the state of Michigan?
First of all, racism has no place in my heart or in any of the people that support me. And if you have racist feelings towards our fellow man, I don't want your support. What we need to do is have a more tolerant society of different viewpoints, but more importantly, we need to back each other up, and we need to give educational opportunities to everybody. I've supported, as I mentioned, the skilled training bill. We need to stop looking back at the sins of the past to explain all of the problems of today. We need to fix the problems of today, and that is we need to focus on education and training opportunities. It doesn't matter what color you are, what gender you are, who you love. I want everyone to be successful. That's good for everybody, and that is what I continue to work on in the legislature.
Thank you, Candidate Lefebvre. Candidate Ritchie, what measures do you support or propose related to modernizing our public schools?
Am I not meant to address the racial and justice
Oh,
question?
I apologize. Go ahead.
Can you restate it, please?
Yes. How would you address the racial, health, and economic inequities in the state of Michigan?
Right. You know, I think this is really important to acknowledge that there are dramatic discrepancies in education amongst different racial groups and minority groups. There are dramatic discrepancies in access to healthcare, but also health outcomes amongst racial groups and ethnic minorities. And that is just one layer of injustice that we see in our society. And I think what we really need to focus on is ensuring that we have equal outcomes amongst these different groups. So focusing on making sure that we have equal graduation rates, equal successes in high school. When we look at health outcomes, we know that certain racial groups have been particularly hit hard, and that's for a number of different reasons. But our healthcare system doesn't adequately address that.
Thank you. And my apologies again. So moving on to the next question, Candidate Richer, what measures do you support or propose related to modernizing our public schools?
Well, I think COVID has really brought this to the forefront, hasn't it? That we have students that don't have access to broadband, and that has a real implication for their success. I know in the classroom, when I make an assignment, I assume that students have access, and that's not something that I can do now. I know that I have many students that have to drive into town to have access to broadband. And so I think that's one key component. I think another really important aspect that we need to address is health issues amongst our students. In this district, we have disproportionate levels of substance abuse and mental health issues. And so I think, as we move forward, and we really want our students to succeed, and we want them to be able to go out and be innovative, we have to put their health at the forefront. And that includes substance abuse and mental health education.
Thank you. Candidate LaFave?
Yeah. First of all, I want to get our teachers and our students into a 21st century learning environment. I want to cut the red tape that limits the options that our teachers and our students have. That's why my internship bill was so important, because I took 30 pages of government red tape and slashed it down to 6. And now our students can get the internships at UP businesses. Obviously, rural broadband is very important for so many in the district. And also, I think we need to start cutting some of the nonsense rules that Lansing puts on our UP teachers. I think our local elected school boards do a better job making decisions about our students' education, and parents do, than Lansing politicians. That's why I support getting rid of the requirement for 2 years of foreign language. I think that'd be really helpful for the skilled trades and for the people of the UP.
Thank you, Candidate LaFave. Moving on to the next question. Candidate LaFave, do you think the current way we fund public schools is fair and adequate? If not, what changes would you propose?
No, because Upper Peninsula schools get less money per pupil than many downstate schools do. Now, over the last 4 years, we've cut that discrepancy, I think, down by 70%, but we have more work to do with what we call a 2X formula. If the richest schools get a $100 increase per pupil, UP schools get a $200 per pupil increase. I've supported that my entire time in the legislature, and we are very much close to getting rid of that gap without increasing taxes. Governor Whitmer's proposal was to get rid of that 2X formula this time around. I vehemently opposed that. I fought it in the legislature, and I will fight at any opportunity when she presents it in her next budget.
Thank you. Candidate Richer?
Yeah, obviously the way we fund our schools isn't appropriate for each district. We know in this district, for example, we spend a disproportionate amount of money on heating, for example, or busing. So each district has its own unique issues that it has to deal with. What we need to focus on is providing adequate funding so that we see equal outcomes amongst those districts. And that's where my focus will be, on ensuring that students in the 108 district are just as likely to succeed as students in other districts. I think, one of the challenges we face is that part of the funding for schools, of course, comes from the local community. And that means that our poorer communities, by definition, don't have the same amount of resources. And so in the 108 district, my focus is going to be on ensuring that our students have the very best outcome.
Thank you, Candidate Richer. Moving on to the next question. Candidate Richer, what policies do you propose to increase jobs and to revitalize our businesses and industries?
Thanks. I think it's a great question because we've seen so many changes in the district over the last 40 or 50 years. And this area had once really been a manufacturing powerhouse. And now what we're seeing, in fact, is that some of the largest employers in the area include education, healthcare, and tourism. So as we promote education, as we improve access to healthcare, ensuring that all of our citizens have access to healthcare, that's really going to help fuel the economy. Also, tourism is becoming so important in this area. And so as a scientist who deals in areas of environmental health and human health, I'm really going to focus on our natural resources and making sure that we can use those natural resources and they'll always be available in the condition necessary to support that tourism industry. One thing that we can also continue to explore and exploit is increasing manufacturing.
Thank you. Candidate Lefebvre?
I think that right now, at least pre-pandemic, the job creators in the Upper Peninsula, our small businesses, were doing a really good job. We didn't need help creating jobs before the pandemic. What we had was unilateral government regulations and restrictions by Governor Whitmer that destroyed small businesses. So number one is we need to allow businesses to reopen, and they need to be able to reopen safely. Number two is I will continue to fight for the Pipeline 5 tunnel, which has thousands of jobs, the Sioux Locks, and I was able to work with the Trump administration and General Assemblyman John Nygren in Marinette to expand Marinette Marine with billions of dollars, which has a huge impact on the Upper Peninsula. But more importantly than job creation right now is we have a housing shortage. So I'm working with locals as well as my colleagues in the state legislature for a tax incentive that would help us build the housing that we need in the UP. One, to make sure we have enough actual houses, but two, make our community better.
Thank you. Moving on, Candidate Lefebvre, how would you encourage the youth of today to become involved in conservation and wildlife management matters?
When we talk about conservation matters, and what it boils down to is there's no better conservationist for the trees than the paper industry. And there's no better conservationist for the deer herd than hunters. What we need to do is encourage our kids to get out there and go hunt, to learn about the great outdoors in the Upper Peninsula. That's why I sponsored a House bill that would allow people with disabilities to use a air-powered bow if they can't use a crossbow or a regular bow. And for the rest of us that can use a crossbow, we'd be able to use the airbow during rifle season. We want to cut down the cost of a deer tag in the Upper Peninsula, cut down on camping fees. It's much cheaper for me to go and camp at We Energy's campground than it is a state campground that I paid for with state tax dollars. That needs to be fixed, because if you get the kids in the outdoors, they're going to enjoy it and they're going to love it for a lifetime. But right now we have too many barriers to entry. I'm breaking those barriers down.
Thank you, Candidate Lefebvre. Candidate Richer?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. How would you encourage youth of today to become involved in conservation and wildlife management matters?
Yeah, thank you. And part of the reason I'm a biologist is because I grew up here in the Upper Peninsula, hunting with my father and being outside, seeing the different types of wildlife and really engaging in the outdoors. And so for me, that's actually what fueled my career. I think young people really need to see the opportunities that are available to them. One thing that I've done as a teacher is I've worked very closely with a large number of students who have interest in environmental areas. Those are hunters, turkey hunters, deer hunters, etc., in allowing them to see the whole range of job opportunities. So I think one thing that we need to do is really focus on allowing our students, helping our students to see how they can live a wonderful Upper Peninsula life and make that a job. I think one thing that we really need to pay attention to is also maintaining those natural resources, particularly our deer herd. We risk it with with chronic wasting disease.
Thank you, Candidate Richer. Moving on to our next question. Candidate Richer, how would you propose fixing the dams and the roads within the Upper Peninsula?
Well, one thing that I noticed as I was traveling around, I spent quite a bit of time going to different townships and their township meetings. And one of the challenges that these townships face is just having the funds to actually address some of the issues. In Holmes Township, I saw some of the worst roads I've seen in the district. And so I think what we really need to do is focus on infrastructure. And that's something that's been lacking. I think we need to look at how we are investing in infrastructure in the state. And that is so crucial to not only building the economy, providing good jobs, trade jobs, but it also helps to fuel the continued growth of the economy. So my focus is going to be looking at the budget, where we're investing, and ensuring that we are investing in basic infrastructure, which fuels economic growth, and investing in education, which fuels economic growth.
Thank you. Candidate Lefebvre?
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to look at the budget for the last 4 years now. And it's quite simple. We put more money into roads than ever before for the last 4 years in a row. The Governor Whitmer vetoed $350 million of additional money, but still we hit record road funding numbers. The problem is it doesn't cycle down to our local units of government. It doesn't cycle down to the County Road Commission or the city of Escanaba or the township of Escanaba or other small communities. The problem is it gets eaten up by MDOT. Our state trunk lines are great. They're wonderful. They're not paved with gold, but they're doing well. What we have is a lack of money going to our local units of government. So less money for MDOT, more money for local units of government to fix their roads, hold them accountable, but no, don't increase taxes, and no to a 45-cent gas tax increase.
Thank you. Candidate Lefebvre, with the increased pressures of COVID and the spending involved in that, what can the legislature do to help keep students in seats and colleges financially whole?
Well, the first thing we need to do is get people back to work that are able to do so. Because as I mentioned earlier, if businesses don't open and paychecks aren't being paid out, then there's no money. I can increase income tax to 99.9%, but it doesn't mean I'm going to get a single penny of revenue because nobody has a job because the government shut down everybody's work. So we need to get our economy back safely to bring in any revenue to the state to pay for vital infrastructure such as roads, bridges, and our wonderful K-12 education system. But that means we need to get our economy working again because we can't just borrow the money from China like the federal government does. We have to steal it from taxpayers. And if they're not getting a paycheck, there's no money for us to take.
Thank you. Candidate Richer?
Yes. In order to improve the economy, we actually have to address the underlying health issue. And this has been shown again and again and again in economic studies looking at which states are succeeding economically despite the healthcare crisis. So if we want students in seats and we want the state to be financially whole and colleges and schools financially whole, we have to address that underlying health crisis. We can have students in schools, provided that the infection rate of the community remains below 5%. We can do that when we are social distancing and wearing masks. And what we see is that when we have proper management of the health crisis, that actually the economy does quite well. So this is one thing that I think we need to focus on. Right now in Escanaba, we're having schools closed, the same thing in Gladstone. Delta County has the highest rate of increase in COVID infections. Right now, 13% of the population of those tested are testing positive.
Thank you. Candidate Richer, how would you increase funding for the local governments?
One of the challenges that we face right now is a loss of revenue sharing. When COVID first hit, that was predicted to be as high as 25 or 30%. Right now, we're seeing that, in fact, much of the state has recovered, barring small businesses, small farms, et cetera, which is really what helps to fuel the Upper Peninsula. So what we need to do is focus on is, again, increasing that revenue sharing by addressing the economic crisis in the state as a whole.
Thank you. Candidate LaFave?
Yeah, the legislature has not cut revenue sharing. That's just simply not true. We've increased revenue sharing year on year, but it's not enough. I understand that we have severe budgetary problems in the state, and you have a few solutions. You can either raise taxes, which I'm not willing to do during a pandemic, or we can think outside the box. So I have a plan for raising local unit of government's property tax revenues without increasing the property taxes. The problem we have is with proposal 2, where if you live in your house for 40 years, your taxes never really go up. But you get somebody that's in their 20s and they move into that same old house, their taxes go up by $4,000 to $5,000 a year. What we need is more housing, and we need to encourage people to renovate and increase the value of their houses without giving a massive property tax increase overnight. We need to transition them to the higher tax bracket, the higher taxable value, not a higher tax percentage. And I have a plan to do that.
Thank you. Candidate LaFave, the city of Escanaba has seen an increase in water rates. What can the legislature do to help?
Well, the first thing we could do is not follow through with Governor Snyder's rules that made them rip out every single water line in the entire city of Escanaba. Part of the problem is that to fix the problem that happened in Flint, we are overcompensating with ridiculous regulations on cities like Escanaba that never had a Flint level or anywhere near lead level problem. We need to increase investment into this particular issue, though, for water safety and replacement of these pipes. The city of Escanaba residents shouldn't have to foot this whole bill on their own. I think that what we need to do is cut state government and overfunding of things like the Attorney General's office that has 280 full-time employees, and give that money to the local units of government.
Thank you. Candidate Richard?
Thank you. I think it's important to note that lead is a neurotoxin, and exposure to any lead has a physiological effect, which includes aggression. It includes lower academic achievement and developmental problems. So lead is a serious issue. And I think that obviously this should not be borne by communities alone, that this really needs to be addressed in a statewide program. And that's what we're seeing right now. There has recently been a large amount of money that has been apportioned to helping communities like ours deal with lead pipes and deal with the potential health implications of lead.
Thank you. Candidate Richard, what is your opinion on the 2 ballot proposals?
So Proposition 1 is looking to essentially apply or provide more funding to state-funded lands and parks. So in previously, money that would come in from mining and other natural resources would come into trust funds. And there was a cap on how much of that could be spent for regeneration or renewal of facilities within parks, etc., and on state land. And there was then a minimum level set as to how much land could be purchased. So Proposition 1 would do away with those set points and allow, in fact, that trust fund to grow and allow more money to come in, both for land purchases as well as for rejuvenation. And of course, I would support that, right? I think.
Thank you. Candidate LaFave?
Yes, I have voted for both Proposition 1 and Proposition 2 in the legislature to put it before the people of the state of Michigan. So I support both of them. Proposition 1, the fundamental problem is that we have all this money that's sitting in an account. It's $800 million. And the only thing we could really do with it was buy more land for the DNR. I oppose the DNR buying more land. I think that the state government owns enough UP land. This is going to allow us not to get more money in the fund. It's not a raising of revenue, but it allows us to manage the stuff that we already have properly so our snowmobile trails can get fixed. As far as Proposition 2, that would allow citizens to be protected with their cell phone data, their internet history, and electronic communications such as text messages and emails from unreasonable searches and seizures without a search warrant under the Fourth Amendment to the US Constitution, and it would codify that in the Michigan Constitution. Not only do I support that, but I also would like to expand it to the fields, your camp, which is not protected currently.
Thank you, Candidate Lefebvre. Candidate Lefebvre, what measures do you believe the state government should take to combat climate change?
The state government can do absolutely nothing to impact climate change of the entire planet. If we work alone in a silo, all we're going to do is increase the cost of energy, have rolling blackouts like they do in California, destroy jobs in the Upper Peninsula, and have zero impact on climate change. What we need is to get China and India and emerging countries that account for over 90% of all the CO2 emissions to come to the table. But the Obama administration failed to do that under the Paris Climate Accord. All it did was destroy US-based jobs. What we need is innovation. And under the President Trump's leadership, we have innovated our way to cutting CO2 emissions. But that was not because of government regulations, it was because of efficiencies of market. And shutting down a mine in Menominee County because of climate change isn't going to help the climate.
Thank you. Candidate Richer?
Well, obviously, the state of Michigan alone cannot tackle climate change. That's something that needs to be addressed both at a federal level and at a global level. But we are feeling the effects of climate change. And one of the key components of that is increased rainfall. And for every degree increase in temperature, we see 7% increase in rainfall. And that's what we've been seeing in the area. That's why farmers have been having such a difficult time disrupting planting times, disrupting the time of harvesting if they're actually able to harvest. And so another component of that is actually going to be the high water levels. So climate change does contribute to those high water levels in the lakes. And so this is something that needs to be managed. The impacts of that increasing rainfall for farmers, on the community, for infrastructure. Here in Escanaba and Gladstone, our wastewater treatment plants have been forced to release raw sewage into the lake because of high water levels and increased rainfall.
Thank you. Candidates, we have come to our final question of the evening. Candidate Richer, what are your top 3 state legislative priorities and how would you address them?
Thank you. Obviously, I'm focused on job growth and improving our economic situation, particularly here during COVID. And what we really need to do is address that underlying health issue for us to get back to a strong economy and improving our economy. We know in this district, one thing that would greatly improve job prospects is an investment in infrastructure, broadband, roads, etc. That basic infrastructure that fuels economic growth. And a key component of that is going to be education and healthcare. These are large drivers of employment in our district. And so when we invest in education, we produce an educated workforce that helps to drive the economy. both within the state as well as locally. Improving access to healthcare will also help to improve the economy in this district as we improve local access. And that's a key component of mine.
Thank you. Candidate LaFave?
I'm not sure if I can limit it to 3, but let's see what I can do. Number 1, we need to restore the balance of power between the executive and the legislative branch. Right now, no Upers are at the table when the governor decides that she's going to shut the Upper Peninsula down to phase 4 again. So that's number 1. We need to have a co-equal branch of government. I appreciate the Supreme Court's help on that. We need to reopen the economy safely. We need people getting back to work to bring in, number 1, because we don't know how long this pandemic is going to last. All the amount of masks in the world isn't going to stop the virus. It's only going to delay it. So if you hear someone say, if we just social distance and if we just wear a mask, we can get back to our way of life safely, that's not true. Flattening the curve meant taking longer for getting back to normal. It didn't reduce the number of people that were going to get COVID. It's just not true. We need to cut state government. And by that, I mean the 280 full-time lawyers that work for the Attorney General's office. I'm not going to raise taxes, but I will cut state spending and bring it back to locals.
Thank you. We have now come to the final minutes of the Michigan House Candidate Forum, when each of our candidates will be given 1 minute to make a closing statement. Candidate LaFave, you now have the floor for 1 minute.
Thank you. It's been my honor to serve the 90,000 people in my House district. Hearing your voices over the last couple months, getting your text messages and emails encouraging me to get well from COVID-19 was humbling, and I really appreciate it. I think that this election comes down to very few things. Do you want the size of government, seeing what the government did over the last 6 months, to get bigger or smaller? I want the government to get out of your life and allow you to be reasonable, responsible, and get back to work safely. My opponent wants the opposite. My opponent wants equal opportunity of outcome, which is what she said earlier today. I know that what that means is socialism. And what that means is that the government dictates to you what choices you make. If you want equal outcome, you know your brother and sister. If you have a sibling, you guys don't have equal outcome and you're raised in the same household. I want equal opportunity. That's what I fight for every day.
Thank you. Candidate Richer?
Thank you again for this opportunity. I really appreciate having the time to speak. My opponent has made it clear during this forum that his first priority is to go to Lansing and have a personal fight with Governor Whitmer. And that's not going to move this district forward. My focus is on the well-being of our community. And in order to do that, I'm going to have to work with a variety of people on different sides of the aisle. And I look forward to that because I'm going to be looking for places where we agree and where we can work together, and not always focusing on areas where we disagree. My opponent has said very clearly that the governor doesn't have anybody from the Upper Peninsula at the table. I wonder why that is. When I go to Lansing, the governor will put me at the table and I'll be able to work for our community.
Thank you. This concludes our candidate forum for the Michigan 108th Representative District. The forum sponsors would like to thank the candidates and the audience for their participation. This forum has been recorded and will be available for viewing on our local website at www.lwvdeltacounty.org in a day or so. We also want to thank the media for their help in promoting the forum. For further information on the upcoming election, go to our online voter guide at vote411.org. And remember to get out and vote November 3rd. The polls are open 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Any eligible Michigan voter can vote by mail, also known as voting by absentee ballot. Voters must first apply for an absentee ballot by filling out an application. Until October 20th, 2020, you may apply using the online options, but after October 20th, the completed application must be sent or delivered. When you receive your ballot, follow the instructions carefully. A large number of absentee ballots were spoiled in the primary election because the voter failed to sign the envelope. If you have questions about your ballot, please call your local clerk. Voters should return their completed absentee ballot as soon as possible to their local clerk. The League urges you to hand deliver your completed ballot to your local clerk or in your clerk's drop box instead of using the U.S. mail. Check our Facebook page and website to find a listing of local drop boxes. Please note the drop box is only valid for the jurisdiction where the box is located. For example, you cannot drop a ballot meant for Bark River into the Escanaba drop box. Please remember to vote for the partisan races, the nonpartisan races, and at the bottom of the ballot, the proposals. Your vote is important. Vote early if you can, but go out and vote on November 3rd. Thank you and have a good evening.